The ATA pilots, 1,500 of them, flew 440,000 planes of every variety, of every state, in every long distance, short distance, and what they did was just extraordinary. Like the Battle of Britain couldn't have happened. Just physically, because it's like if you don't have your ammunition for your weapon and you don't have a supply chain for your ammunition, you don't have anything to fire, and so you're not a soldier, you're just a person with a stick. Well, if you don't have a plane to get up in the sky and defend the country, then there's no war effort there at all.
The more I read, the more I wanted to know, and I was absolutely stunned that I didn't know anything about these women and what extraordinary endeavours they went to perform their tasks, and how they were never recognised for decades. These incredible women were going up in planes that they didn't know how to get into quite often, couldn't reach, so had to have ladders. And yeah, it must have been exciting for them, but terrifying. They were flying wounded machines. And the planes, they didn't know how to start them. They had to have pilot's notes in order to know, turn to page 117 to see how you get in a Lancaster.
We picked this scene, which is a training manoeuvre which is accurate to the time, where the instructor forces the plane into what they call a stall spin. The aircraft is taken up to an altitude of 5,000 feet, and it drops 2,000 feet of altitude whilst corkscrewing, basically plummeting towards the earth. We engaged a storyboard artist, Warren, and Warren worked with our development director, Michael Engler, myself, Tom Debenham, our DOP, our director of photography, and we basically storyboarded the whole sequence in drawn form. We had to be really clever with how we were going to shoot this. But at this time we became aware of an emerging new production process called virtual production, and thought that this might be a really smart solution. For those that have never seen a virtual production stage, basically it is a lot of very, very high quality LED screens that are then showing the digital assets that you would have in the scene.
It was built on a large scale. The volume is 28 metres long, it's 25 metres wide. We have a fully dynamic ceiling, so the LED ceiling has 700 LED panels in it, and it's split into 8 sections which all move independently of each other. The LED volume itself has got 2,600 row BP2 panels in the wall, where the pixel pitch is 2.8 millimetres apart between each pixel. We have a Vicon tracking system, mocap systems, where that's used to track the exact position of the camera within the volume, so that when the camera moves, the image on the wall is moving corresponding to the camera, which is part of the magic of virtual production. What we really wanted to get to is just have a space of virtual production volume that's best in class, that's easy for our productions to come in and use, whether it's shooting aerial flying sequences like Hamble that we've just been shooting this week, or whether it's productions on the scale of House of the Dragon or Barbie or any of these large films. Whatever the scale, we just want to make it an easy tool so that DPs, directors, production designers, VFX supervisors, they can all come in here and use it with ease and really break down those barriers that sometimes new innovations in technology can bring.
Territory Studio got involved at the very outset of this project, working on pulling concepts together, because obviously what we're creating no longer exists. Southampton, as it was in 1941, is no longer. So we were very heavily reliant on a lot of archival information, aerial photography, materials from the National Archives. There's a lot of desk research involved. The footprint of the terrain that the plane flies over is extremely large. It goes all the way from Hamble and the Southampton water up to the New Forest.
So there's 500,000 houses that have been brought back in, over 1 million trees into that landscape, and then the whole thing is then digitally map painted to create obviously the texture for all the fields. One of the biggest challenges with virtual production for world building is creating something that's as photorealistic and as accurate as it's possible for for that world of that era. But secondly, making it performant enough to run on a volume of this scale. So there's a lot of work that goes into, like, you know, how the models are designed, how the textures are designed, how the lighting models all work, how reflections work, how the sky works. So a lot of the animations that we pre-wrote in tech viz have to be adapted on the fly to go and basically meet the demands of the on-set environment.
Jay Cole did a brilliant job with making our one-to-one replica Tiger Moth. You know, it's got an operational rudder, it's got operational elevators. As soon as we put our two actors into the plane in their costumes, you could see they were just absorbed by their environment and what was around them. But we had a really significant challenge, which was we had a very, very large object to get into a virtual production volume. We had a number of test days leading up to our shooting window at V Stage, where we were testing everything from the types of lenses that Tom wanted to use. We wanted to work with some quite traditional, not quite antique, but traditional, slightly older lenses to give it a particular look and feel. We needed to double check all of the colorways that we were planning to work with. Everything had to be tested to make sure that the color calibration was correct in the volume. We did a lot of work on testing how the propeller would interact with both camera and the screens, what the reflections on the goggles looked like, the windscreens and stuff. So we went through a very, very heavy period of testing.
We're just getting ready for a rehearsal, so I've got the sequence open here, which is sequence 3.
And the shoots went, you know, majority really, really well. We were only filming for a few days. We had a couple of technical hitches with the physical aspect of the shoot, but the volume performed admirably. So it was a really large asset for the Unreal Engine to be processing.
Not everything's as real time as you might like to think. It takes a lot of thought and preparation to actually get everything on the screens in the way that you need it to be there, and to present it to camera in a way that feels believable. The benefits are that it doesn't rain, the sun doesn't go down, and it's predictable and controllable.
So I think, you know, in brief, the benefits of virtual production was that it gave us a space that the actors felt was real, that had dynamic integrated lighting and looks really authentic. It gave us the opportunity to manage and manipulate certain assets within that space. So, for example, we could slightly cheat where the sun position was if it made for a better shot. We were able to sort of further populate the scene with extra barrage balloons or extra planes and those other things.
This shoot's particularly interesting because of the virtual production stuff and working at Warner Brothers, and the sense that this hasn't been really done very much before, if at all, and the moving from a load of words on a page to a load of people coming on board and doing what they do with it, and watching absolute experts be brilliant at what they do is astonishing. What I want this story to do, and the experience of seeing it, and particularly seeing it on a big screen, is to make people look at something in a new way, to make people look at what happened back then and what an underrepresented group of people were doing, what women at the time were doing, and feel a very kind of immediate, visceral sense of how incredible that was and what it is possible to achieve.
I mean, everything I do, I like to use screen skills because I think they do a tremendous job in helping people, much needed people, come into this industry. And on this, even though this was quite a small shoot, we were able not only to contribute to screen skills, but actually have 6 of the screen skills students come in and play a very helpful role on our shooting. So, you know, that in itself was wonderful, but the fact that we were then able to get 3 groups to come in and watch as we were doing it was exciting.
The virtual production process is incredibly interesting in as much as it sort of forces you to bake in some critical creative decisions very early in the process. You know, decisions that typically you would arrive at later in the development or the production process, you are having to make quite early and up front. And I think whilst that is helpful from a production management, production perspective, at times it felt like we didn't have that sort of creative bandwidth to experiment and to challenge and change. So I think that's one of my big learning points, is just how much needs to be baked in and decided up front and early. In terms of how the hardware actually performed, faultless. I mean, V-Stage, both the equipment and the personnel that drive it are world class. So I come out of it being quite the advocate for virtual production. I can definitely see that there is going to be a lot of productions that will benefit from this production process. I definitely think virtual production is a technology that's here to stay. I think if used in the right way, can be incredibly beneficial to productions, both from a production and a creative perspective, but would warn with a little bit of caution, you know, making sure at the outset and the start of the process that you're at the right point of the project being sufficiently developed to be able to be making some quite critical, big, you know, decisions quite early on.
It's just magic. It's what we do. It's what the movie business is all about. Magic, capital M.